and speak to you from inside Kanzi'S painting. Many of you may not know me. I teach philosophy of religion and theology all the time, but my specialty is a focus on science and religion, and especially around evolution, primates, and what that means for Christian thought. I am currently immersed in an exhibit from the Smithsonian on human origins. So, in developing my topics for today, that was on my mind as I think about early hominins and how Kanzi has affected my work. I hope to share this work more with the International Society for Science and Religion, which is another place where I have deep involvement. Let me define my topic for today. I work in a world most likely to be resistant to hearing about Kanzi and Kanzi's capacities. I teach in a seminary preparing clergy and other Christian leaders. And I strongly believe that Kanzi's legacy has the potential to be transformative in such a way that authority figures whom many people respect could make a difference in how we perceive ourselves and how we perceive non-human nature. I think there could be influences on both religion and philosophy, but that will require us to re-examine and alter systems of thought that are fairly well entrenched. And let me move on to talk a little bit about what Christian resistance really looks like. And as someone living in the middle of the US, you can imagine that I occasionally encounter that resistance. Some of you have already alluded to these issues. I'll stick with Christian thought then for the most part. But I want to start with Aristotle's hierarchy of being, or the great chain of being, that creates a clear division between spiritual and material beings. And humans are cleverly positioned in that view between the spirit world and the material world. We already begin to see a separation there, so compelling to Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century that it became a major part of his doctrines concerning what it means to be human and the human relationship to nature and also to the angels and to God. Thomas Aquinas imported this recently translated work of Aristotle into a legacy that affected the Catholic Church and many Protestants thereafter. But there are more contemporary accounts of what the separation of humans from animals really looks like. John Hott has written a book on ecology and picks up on the biblical metaphor of exile to describe how some Christian thought sees humans in relationship to nature. We see ourselves as exiles living in a foreign land on this earth, and when our true home is really with God and the angels. This creates a real distance from animals and habitats, and that becomes a theological and ethical problem for us. Here's what the resistance to science really looks like. In the first place, it means a refusal to accept that humans are part of the animal world. That separation that has been created is more of a gap sometimes. It also means, in the second place, that we have a refusal to accept the true capacities of animals, including their personhood, and influenced by the resistance of some scientists. As companions, we have some reluctance to understand that language might be a capacity shared with animals. Behind all this is a strong commitment in much Christian thought to human exceptionalism and human uniqueness. Uh, I, that's an issue I'm working on primarily. Can we defend that kind of supremacy for humanity, or should we let it go? And that will be the most difficult argument to make among those who accept Christian thought. I get really visceral reactions from people when I'm asked to speak about that particular point, which tells me that the resistance is not just intellectual, but that I have tapped into something really at the core of who people think they might be. I think it's a problem when we take the most exceptional human beings and compare them to animals instead of looking at the variety and the amazing adaptations that create that variety among humans. We use that kind of language not only to denigrate animals and belittle their abilities, but we then associate certain humans with animals in order to have to shore up our biases against certain people. The legacy of Kanzi is that um, we have the potential um, for counter evidence to move people to see something new and different in the natural world. Language, of course, is one of the first things. And I run up against a skepticism based on really narrow definitions of what language is, really looking at grammar and syntax in a reductionistic way, which is an irony given that when I grade papers, I wonder whether my students actually know grammar and syntax some days. Um, I tend to lean in the direction of Barbara King's work, the dynamic dance, and some other pieces that make um, language more about effective communication, involving not just words and sentences, but gestures, facial expressions, affective sorts of modes, and in essence, an embodied and social language, not just an on paper sort of correctness about our words and speech. Besides language, I think Kanzi has given us something important in symbolism. And I love that so many of you have actually provided the background information that I cite in my work, so I don't have to say quite as much. I think that Kanzi not only mastered, but also exceeded the use of lexicograms as a symbolic language. The fact that Kanzi could be creative with language is impressive. That Kanzi could communicate effectively and actually have a kind of a directorial and responsive and interactive um, communication with persons is powerful. And the article about the invented vocalizations between Panbanisha and Kanzi really impressed me with the full language capacity of bonobos. I also, as some of you have said, think of art itself as a kind of symbolism and communication. As I walk around the Smithsonian exhibit on my campus, um, I stop sometimes at the panel on human symbols, symbol use, and imagination, and look at the jewelry and the use of color on stone tools, the use of artifacts and materials like bone to record information, and of course the cave paintings. And I see that this legacy is probably not just so for humans and human ancestors, but perhaps so for animals as well. I'm sitting here in the midst of a painting by Kanzi, a person who worked at what was then the Great Ape Trust, um, provided the red background, but Kanzi painted the rest. And when Kanzi was asked what the painting was about, he used the lexigram to say, it's lettuce. And when you look at this piece, it's kind of amazing. It looks like lettuce to me. I do wonder sometimes whether we're over-interpreting or both the use of the lexicograms or other things, or even the art pieces provided to us by Kanzi. But I am convinced that this is how Kanzi sees lettuce, in fact. Other capacities that I have known from Kanzi and Panbanisha have to do with tool making, memory, and even the bicultural adaptation and social life of the bonobos. Um, if I'm looking at hominin history and evolution, those capacities are spoken of as dependent somewhat on language or abilities to communicate, certainly are related to the social life of hominins, Neanderthals, for example, and their ability to survive. Why should they not be part of the bonobo story as well? Now, if I put together the use of language and symbolism and some of these other capacities, I begin to think that perhaps one of the most threatening things to people who do Christian thought is that capacities of bonobos begin to erode away our sense of what makes us religious beings, because symbolism in particular and language, memory are so critical. So is the social life. If I take Sue's work and I think about Franz de Waal's book, Good Natured, The Origins of Good and Evil, I have an argument for there being morality as a capacity, or as a proto-morality in his words. There are others who would go so far as to talk about morality. I think also of Barbara King's book, The Evolution of God, as an argument that demonstrates that primates have certain capacities that are analogous to those in religion. We even think of Goodall's repeated story about the displays of chimpanzees in front of waterfalls as a kind of expression of awe. And if they could access perhaps language, there could be the roots of what we understand to be religion. And I don't know how much has been done, work was done with Kanzi on morality and experiences of awe and connections with spirituality, but I'd love to learn from you about those things. Here are my conclusions. I think Kanzi's capacity to learn and adapt require religion and philosophy to revisit all their assumptions about the human-animal divide. That will be painful for people in religions to do. But it will require a total reworking of many doctrines that are espoused by the church. My second conclusion is this. Kanzi teaches us something about what it means to be humans as social beings who are endowed with language and communication modes, but also as beings who share the imaginative and adaptive qualities that connect us rather than distinguish us from bonobos. Kanzi's legacy will only persist if we tell his story. And the transformative power of what Kanzi accomplished will only be realized as we do that work. Thank you.